advisory panel for Tube and Pipe. And I wanted to introduce to you our next speaker, Paul Vragel. Paul is the president of 4A Better Business Incorporated. It's an implementation-based consultancy. He is also a frequent presenter at FabTech and many other conferences. So here you go. Go get him, Paul.
Are we live here? Yeah, we are. Okay. As Rick said, implementation-based consultant. Our focus is helping owners, CEOs, and their companies operationally go from here to there in that much time. So I've worked with tube mills, automotive, aerospace, but to give you some context rather than going through a bunch of titles, I'm going to tell you a story about something that happened early in my career as a naval architect and marine engineer. So I was hired at the age of 22 to manage ship construction in Spain, hired by Amoco. 2 weeks after I was hired, I'm on a plane over to Spain. My instruction set is, figure out what you're supposed to do and do that. It's a nice charge, 22 years old. So a year later, one of the ships that we're having built over there comes into its guaranteed dry dock. Guaranteed dry dock, you open everything up, see how it's working. We open up the main engine, which is a 30,000 horse diesel, and all of the bearing material that's supposed to be in the bottom end bearings is lying on the journal in pieces. So ship is in Lisbon. I'm there as an observer. I call my boss in Chicago and tell him what the situation is. And my boss gives me an even more succinct set of instructions. 2 words. Anybody have some suggestions what those might be? Fix it. There you go. Okay. Exactly. That was it. 23, observer status, so no authority, no staff, no budget, no domain knowledge. I don't know anything about bearings and high-powered diesel engine. We don't have a contract with the engine maker. The engine is built under license from the Danes. So this is a slam dunk, right? This is going to be easy. So I go to the engine maker and I ask them the first logical question, what's the plan? And they look at me a little funnily and say, well, we don't think we have a problem. We think the Danes have a problem because they designed the engine, we just built it to what they said. So all that's going to happen if I move heaven and earth to get the Danes down, there's finger pointing. Okay, I conclude that I got nothing except I'm there. So went down on the floor I didn't know what I was going to do actually, and so I'm observing, watching, trying to talk to the operators. They speak Spanish, I speak English. So they learn a little English, I learn a little Spanish. In a couple days I see what the basic problem is, but I'm pretty sure I don't know all of the pieces that go into that. But they do, because that's what they do every day. So what I need to do is somehow find a way to get that up on the table. So, okay, long story short, I did. We just kind of asked them some questions that kind of led them in that direction. And in a couple weeks, using the information that came out, they were able to make perfectly good bearings. And I looked back at that and I said, this is interesting. 23, no domain knowledge, no authority, no budget, no staff, cross-language, cross-culture in a plant overseas that I have never seen before, and we got a permanent increase in their manufacturing capability that they own. Pretty powerful stuff. So I took away from that, and this is relevant to the rest of the things I'm going to say, a couple really simple things. Employees are the world's experts at knowing what they actually do every day, their local process. 90% of the issues that waste time and money and produce bad results are embedded in how all of those local processes really actually work, which turns out is different than, usually different than how they're documented in the system, right? And you guys live this every day. It's also different than what management expects is happening. That was my perspective at the age of 23 of what could be done, what was possible to do when you engage the employees. So let me transition into there we go. So the title of this is Put People and Process First for Ongoing Successful Digital Transformation. And the first statement I'm going to make to frame this, there we go, the last thing that you need for digital transformation is technology. It's absolutely the last thing, and as we go through this, I'll justify that statement. So, 5 key elements. First is exactly what's up here. What are your priorities for the business? How are things aligned according to those priorities? What is your commitment to actually doing that, not just writing some report that's going to sit on the shelf? And making sure that all your financial decisions track what you're doing there. First step, where are we trying to go? Second step, and we're going to spend a little bit more time looking at that, is deep end-to-end understanding of your processes and interactions. So what do I mean by processes and interactions? I'm not going to read all of these to you, but they're customer contacts, process design, change management, manufacturing engineering, all of those kinds of elements that are part of processes that result in, we hope, what you really want to do as a business. So let's shrink those down. Here's another set. Same thing. Now it's order processing, production control, production inventory, maintenance, setup, change, a lot of things that were also talked about this morning as important parts of ensuring you're getting out of the mill what you really want. So all of these are interconnected. What you do in the front end influences what you do in the back end. What you do in maintenance influences what kind of operations you're going to get out of your mill. So here's the issue, which, back to that origin story, 90% of the issues that waste time and money and get you bad results are embedded in the system. And as I said, that's usually different than the documented system, if there is one, or what management really expects is happening. Here's some examples. People say, well, we have a pretty good idea of what's really happening. You know, there might be some companies that don't have that, but we're pretty good. Just do a kind of a self-test against these. IT workarounds. Anybody using Excel? Okay, everybody. Anybody think that their use of Excel is just fine? They're getting all the data they want, it all connects, they can have a good idea of what their operations are really doing? Yeah, right. So 100%, 0%. So that's an issue. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Ineffective process capture. Again, how many people think what they have as documentation is exactly what they're doing? Okay. If you have any questions as I go through this, please just raise your hand and let's talk about them. I'm going to talk about some things that probably make you a little uncomfortable, but okay, that's life. That's where we are on a lot of these. So, lack of change control. So, you expect your employees to produce with the systems that you have set up. Maybe those systems don't work exactly the way you think they work. But the employees are going to work hard to try to make that work. They're going to find a better way. They go to the supervisor. Supervisor says, "Oh, I can't deal with that right now. Just do it." Or if I have to deal with that, then I got to deal with maintenance and engineering, and I don't have time for all that right now. When does that second idea come? Tough environment to get that. Growth. Growth is also a problem. If you had one person or one small group doing something, you grow, you double your sales, you grow that group, suddenly you've got a whole different set of interactions and controls that need to be in place to make sure what you want is really actually happening. Not bad, but it contributes to this lack of deep process knowledge. And the question is, so what? Now we get a couple people, so we have our business problems and the work and the opportunity. Somebody comes in with one understanding of the process and a solution based on that understanding. Somebody else shows up, they've got a different understanding of the process because we don't have that deep common understanding. They've got their own ideas about what the solution is. We're both talking about the same process, but now we got two maybe diametrically opposed, certainly not compatible, ideas of what the next step should be. So how does that get resolved? How long have you been in the company? What's your position? Who do you know? A whole bunch of things. How fast can you think on your feet? A whole bunch of things that have nothing to do with solving the problem. So what do those results look like? A mess. Hard to get through anything. It's reality. So now let's just take digital transformation and lay that on top, which is a shortcut a lot of people try. So it depends on what you want to do. Maybe you've got an ERP system. Maybe you think robotic process automation is a great solution. You want to get closer to your customers and let them do a lot more of the front-end interaction with your organization. Maybe it's IoT. Maybe it's virtual reality, machine learning, digital twins. All of these things are possible. Maybe you're even looking at a transformation of your business because you're going to be instead of a single entity, you're going to be a partner with somebody else and take advantage of their capabilities. You lay this all on top of the existing process, which again, we don't have clear line of sight to how that works and what that really looks like. And what do we get? We get IT and business disaster. No employee buy-in because nobody went and asked them or engaged them in the process. Extended implementation times. We blow through budgets. And in the end, we don't meet the objectives. Reference that picture of the intersection. We're stuck trying to do all of these things. Again, reminder, the last thing you need for digital transformation is technology. Don't do that first. Go after your underlying processes, that deep end-to-end process. So the bad news is we don't have line of sight to what's really going to make a difference for our business. Because we have a system, but it's different than what we expect. The good news is we have reporting to work every day the world's experts in knowing what that process actually is. And who are they? It's the employees. They are the world's experts at knowing what they actually do every day. Here's an example. This happened to be from an automotive company who said, well, we understand what our process is. We've got trouble with this one. It keeps coming back. I said, great. What's that process look like? And this is what they showed me. So I went and I looked at how does that process really work according to the employees who really actually do it. And I know this is an eye chart, but that's what that process really looked like. There were 9 different functions, there were 120 steps, there were 7 Excel files that nobody really knew about, 2 new databases. Unknown, but that's the real process according to the people who do it. Now with that, we were able to make big progress in a hurry because we knew what reality was. How many of you were in the morning session on the mill operations? Some of you were, okay. Anyway, they talked about cost considerations, budgets, and changeovers, and a lot more that's not here. But just to give you an idea, this is what one of those things looks like when you go and talk to the employees who actually do it. So this is in the center here. That's in fact the horizontal and vertical representation of the mill. And all of these are the processes that exist at that particular station and the issues that people need to be paying attention to. I know that you made a comment earlier about, yeah, we have all these manuals sitting over here. How do we get people to pay attention to them, right? Well, part of it is this isn't a manual that was handed down to the employees to say, here, this is what tells you what to do. This came from the employees. Go on the mill, watch, listen, get incredibly dirty when they do a change, and you can see all of those things. Okay, out of this, we identified over 100 specific elements that were changeable without any capital investment. Just, this is the reality of what actually happened on the mill according to the people who did it, who wanted, when somebody new came in, they wanted them to be productive really quickly. So they use these. Not a matter of, here's your instructions, here's what the manufacturer says you should do, follow these. These came from them. So they were really highly engaged in what's there, why is it there, how do we prevent these things, bad things, from happening. So this is good as far as the mill goes. But the mill is only part of the equation. Right? There's all the, I mean, there were comments about purchasing, changing X, Y, and Z, and then suddenly the mill performance disappears or some other machine performance disappears. So this is really only part of the equation. The rest of the equation is the rest of the company. Remember all of those things? The mill is probably only in here somewhere. All the rest of this matters. And all the rest of that is part of getting engagement of the employees, understanding what the real process is, not what's documented, not what management thinks it is. What's the real process there? And as you do that, let's go here. Yeah. So now we expand this to the rest of the company, where a lot of those decisions get made that determine what the mill performance is going to be. I mean, there's a lot that happens right there, but there's a lot that happens elsewhere. So you continue that process, and on the upper left there is a top-level diagram of the company, which has all of the processes of the company. How does the whole company work and all of those pieces interact? And as you do that, you can link all of those. Remember, we started with step one. What are your objectives? What do you really want to accomplish? Now you can look at this and see what are the process interactions, what's the responsibilities, what's the data flow, where do things look too complex? Why do we have to go through all of that? Opportunities for improvement, but the chief difference is this is reality. This is how it really actually works. So when you make a change here, you can see all of the things that are connected. So when you make that change, you can make sure that the change doesn't adversely affect all of those other things. In terms of technology, it's also a huge benefit because one of the things that technology gets you is we can dispense with some of the things that we're doing because the technology will take care of it. Well, here we can see exactly when we replace the technology, what's the process that's involved in this. And by the way, we got the employees engaged in getting here. So they can help us in getting to that next level. They're responsible for doing, you're responsible for providing a system that works, but works both ways. Works both ways. So, what do you get from that? Eliminate the waste of time and money and bad results, improve productivity, develop capabilities that increase sales. So with one automotive supplier, we did this. In 6 months, they had a 30% increase in earnings, and they decided, they were a Ford and Chrysler shop, they decided to pursue Toyota. Anybody who's done that has an idea of what's involved. They got their first ever business with Toyota within 12 months. 12 months, because Toyota saw the totality of what they had and what they were able to do, which matches their view of the world, right? So the other thing that comes out of this, people ask, well, where are we going to get the funding to do all this technology change? A 30% increase in earnings, first business Toyota. We did this with a mill. 100 things in an 18-pass mill, just on the mill, not the slitter and all of the purchase, which were also part of it. Provides funding for that technology investment and gives you a roadmap for ongoing improvement. Byproducts. Development of buy-into change. Anybody here struggle with buy-into change? Okay, I'll take that as a yes from everybody. Okay, so you also create an environment that's safe for change. Because the message up front here is, we're not doing this to find low-hanging fruit or eliminate unproductive employees. We're doing this to grow. And you guys, the assembled employees, are all part of that. You're part of the solution, not part of the problem. So you're really creating an improvement-seeking culture. This is a different animal than we do continuous improvement. It's a different environment because you've got people who are interested, who've been engaged, who have seen, as this was being created, seeing that these things are being done. Not, oh yeah, we'll put that on the list, and then 6-8 months, they've not heard from anybody, and they're signed off. The other thing that this addresses, and I was actually having a conversation with somebody earlier, generation issues. Right? People say, oh, the new generation, they're very different. They want to be involved. They want to be able to improve things. But there it is. There it is. It's all built into the process, not a separate thing. It's built in to how everything works, how people think. And there's a common perception that if you change how people think, it'll change how they act. Okay, know anybody who tried to quit smoking? Right? Oh, I think I'll quit smoking. Wow, that sounds tough. No, it's easy. I've done it hundreds of times. Right? I mean, okay, change the way they act, and it will change the way they think. And this propagates through the organization. People have expectations of each other. It's not a top-down exclusive. If the top-down tops keep saying this, it will all happen. No, it's everybody participating in this, management supporting. So those generation issues don't become the dominant topic. You know, we do this, and then for Gen Z, we have to do that. Wow, that changes everything. Here's the business. If you do this in 2 years, what do you think happens? Nothing, right? Nobody cares. It's not visible that anything's happening. So, do that in a few months, and you change the whole outcome. Because when you present employees with this kind of approach, they buy in day one. Now, day 2, 3, 4, 5, they see things happen. So it builds on each other. Okay, I spent this much time on this part of the process, part of the elements, because this is the part that most people skip. Okay, I'm going to touch on the other things because they do matter. The next part is identify the data that you really need. So there was a lot of discussion about, well, we get this data, and nobody cares, right? Well, think about the data that you really need. This process is going to clarify what is the data that we really need, and then use it. If you tell somebody, record all this data, and nobody ever comes and looks at it, you know, what do you get? Nothing. You get a bunch of pieces of paper and no information. So look at the pieces that are important to your process in achieving your objectives. Identify the data you really need and use that. Really use that. Part of using that is look at the source and the quality. A lot of IoT and things like that are going to give you a flood of data. If you don't think through that first, this is the data that we see in a lot of companies. Local Excel anywhere, everywhere. Hands, yeah. Lots of tribal knowledge on which we depend. Reliance and rule of thumb. Consolidated data isn't reliable because it's cobbled together from all of these little pieces. And nobody owns it. So how do we get people to write down this data? Well, think about what you really need, have them capture the data either by hand or electronically, and actually use that. Know who wants that, know to whom that matters. And out of that, you get data-driven decision-making and insights that actually improve performance. And the last step, I told you, technology is the last thing that we need. Forrester says there's 800,000 products out there. How are you going to pick? Look at your business first. Go through those 4 steps. Understand where you are and what's going to move the needle for your business. That gives you a way to act quickly when opportunities present themselves. You don't have to start from ground zero. You're already way ahead of the game, and now you can implement quickly. We did a major extension of an ERP system. This approach, 6 months faster than the vendor thought it was possible to do. And we did the cutover in 4 hours for the whole company. It just gives you tremendous flexibility. Additional technology issues, we're running out of time. This is a whole separate presentation by itself. But you're in a position where you can think about those things and realistically implement technology, whether that's digital or other technologies, and you can really understand what it takes to get there, and you can really get it done. So use the criteria. That's all I have. Any questions that you have? And I know we're running out of time here, but any questions? I'm here the rest of the conference, so if you want to grab me at any point, happy to speak further. So, thank you very much.